Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we've got a comparison video between two of the exact same fragrance of different distributors. And today's just going to be a little chat because, and I mean a short chat. We're going to take the usual hour-long Ramsey ramble and we're going to shorten it because of this cold that I'm still fighting. But a couple little side discussions while we're talking today. One thing I want to mention, the fragrance, in case you're not aware, if you've never seen these bottles before, is this is the vintage of Jacques Bogart Signature. And it came out in 1975. The little side discussions we're going to have is I'm actually going to be blessed enough to interview a Jacques, but not Jacques Bogart, although I guess that would be cool too. But it's going to be Jacques Masson, my terrible Texas French. And you can see the name of his family's house right there on the back of this bottle of Canon, which will be my scent of the day tomorrow. So the interview will be tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. But today we're going to talk about a fragrance that there's a lot of lines of discussions for me with this fragrance, because the fact that we're comparing a vintage in these old bottles of Jacques Bogart, you can do the exact same thing when you're looking at stuff like Furio, or when you're looking at old bottles of One Man Show. Like, I'll give you an example, actually, because I have others too. So here's an old bottle of One Man Show, and here's the current bottle of One Man Show. Whoops, that's Oud Edition, but whatever. It'll show the same purpose. The new one, the old one. See how you can see the 80 degrees, 85 degrees down there at the bottom? Same thing with Signature. The new one looks like this, which almost looks like the same color as a modern Paco Rabanne Pour Homme bottle, and there's a reason. I think these two share lots of similarities to each other, especially that spicy rosemary opening. There are some fougere touches in this fragrance, like there's geranium, for example, but it's not a full fougere. It's almost like it goes halfway, but then it also goes halfway chiffre, you know, that kind of thing. And so anyways, that's a way to tell of the vintages as far as Jacques Bogart goes. If you see the degrees, 85 degrees, so there were multiple iterations of this fragrance, as you can imagine. The original actually said 90 degrees down here, and it didn't have the new updated Bogart script. It was actually the old Bogart, written like this B is written right here. And so that was the first version. Then this is the first reformulation with the 85 degrees. And then the final reformulation is the one that doesn't say the degrees at all in the new bottle, which I quite like. I love this presentation. It's simplistic, but you know what? This house, you know, look at the bottom of the new bottle, okay? This is a budget fragrance now. You can get this fragrance for under $20. Look at the bottom of the bottle. Bogart bottle, made in France. The bottle is glass. You know, for a budget fragrance, this is fantastic. You may think the sprayer's tacky. You may like the built-in sprayer. I don't really care. I like both presentations. Even this presentation, you know, glass bottle, that kind of thing, you know. I don't understand how a house like Jacques Bogart, who sells their fragrances for $15, can do a reformulation like this when other houses that charge hundreds have problems with reformulations. It doesn't compute in my mind. Maybe that's something I'll have to ask Jacques tomorrow, his thoughts on reformulation. So, by the way, if you have questions for my interview tomorrow with Jacques Masson, let me know, because I'm making a list. I'm checking it twice. It's going to be a great interview. Hopefully I'll feel better by then. But as far as Bogart pour homme, so what you get when you first spray, and the vintage is on my left hand, by the way, the modern is on my right hand, and this bottle is thanks to Anuj at Enchante. He had a vintage bottle of this stuff, and so that's the only reason I'm able to do this comparison video, is thanks to him. And actually, Anuj is the one that set up the interview tomorrow. So thanks to him, we have the interview. And so the modern stuff you can get anywhere. You can get this at discounters, on eBay, anywhere. Mercari, I mean, they're everywhere. People treat this house like it's a garbage house, but I think it's a gem house. I think it has a lot of fragrances that punch way above the weight class that they're in. It's a fragrance house that sells budget fragrances, but the fragrances don't smell cheap. The presentations don't look cheap. Everything about the house is, I have no clue how they stay in business or how they make money, to be honest with you. But it opens up with this spicy orange and nutmeg and rosemary. And the rosemary with the spices and a little bit of this aromatic vibe. Like the current version will remind you more of Paco Rabanne pour homme than the vintage, because what happens with the vintage, so the vintage juice, when you first spray, it starts out a little more honeyed. Oh, look at the color of the juice. All right, that honeyed color juice. And look at the color of the bottle on the new one. That is maybe the best representation of how they start, how the differences in how they start. This starts cool, aromatic, green, almost like it just dives right into that 70s aromatic, spicy fragrance, masculine, no sweetness at all. Well, really in either, but this one, the vintage, for whatever reason, has a little bit of this honeyed vibe. There's no honey in this fragrance. There actually is honey in Paco Rabanne pour homme, but I don't think there's any honey in Jacques Bogart's signature at all. Even the vintage version that smells like there's a little bit of a honeyed note, I'm not sure where that's coming from, but I can tell you the pieces of the scent that I think are amped up, and it's the spicy bits. So for example, in the vintage, what really increases is the nutmeg, the rosemary, the clove, and the tree moss or oak moss or whatever they say is listed on here. And so usually you would expect, it's the new version that's sweeter. This house doesn't follow what you would normally expect, though. You have to get that in your mind right away. If you've ever tried anything from Jacques Bogart, you know they don't follow the rules. They do whatever they want. I love that about this house. And then once you get into the heart, you get this geranium, provincial lavender. There's a birch note. So there's a birch note and there's a Russian leather note. So inside of this fougere construct, you get this beautiful smokiness from the birch. You get this Russian leather, which I absolutely love. I seek it out in both versions, and it's there, especially once you hit the dry down. That leather note just makes it so appealing to me, because I love Paco Rabanne pour homme. It's my father's signature scent, as you've heard me say many a times. This is a vintage splash bottle. And as much as I love it, I can't wear it without, thinking about him. It's his fragrance, really. I do love wearing it, and I do wear it from time to time. But with Bogart pour homme, or Bogart signature, there's no associations in my mind, with my old man. So this can easily be mine. And so there's this honeyed facet in the vintage that seems to be missing, like I said, from the current, with the spices, much heavier handed, almost like, the 1970s, they didn't care they weren't worried about pleasing anybody. The fragrances didn't have to be pleasing or mass appealing. You know, if someone smelled this on you and thought that maybe it was too masculine, too spicy, too, too in your face, they didn't care back then. It was the 1970s, right? That's the vibe that the vintage gives you. But the new one, the new version is such a good representation. You know, when Al Manzano and I did our interview, he said everything today is like it's like a approximation. It's an imprint of what you smelled back in the old days. But they have done such a fantastic job of keeping this fragrance true to its heart through all the reformulations. Imagine the changes from 1975 until today that they've had to go through. They had to remove the oak moss. You know, if there was Lirol or Liliol in here, they had to remove it and reformulate it. They have done a fantastic job with this, and they kept the heart and soul of the fragrance what it is. You know what I mean? They haven't lost that yet. Excuse me. So, this comparison video, unfortunately, is kind of a boring one because the fragrance itself, both are so, I would wear both and just be happy either way. I would have no problems wearing the vintage. I would have no problems wearing the modern stuff. And this kind of content, I mean, you know, it's this is real niche fraghead content, if you will. I say niche fraghead because this is a very small subsection of the fraghead population. Some people are into the, you know, vintage, or into the niche fragrances that are expensive. Some people are into the designers that are, you know, exclusive designers, or all, you know, everyone's kind of into different things. Getting into vintage and then also getting into the weeds enough to care about one version of a scent versus another, let's say, or, you know, one distributor of a scent versus another, or one formula of a scent versus another, especially on a fragrance that people think is a throwaway scent for $18. Not many people are going to be hunting this kind of content down. But that's why I wanted to, I literally bought this to do the comparison for the channel. Unfortunately, I've been wearing it all day, and the scents are so close together outside of, to my nose, outside of the fact that there's this increased honeyed bit with spiciness in the old one that's a little bit more amped up. The spiciness is definitely amped up. That's clear. Here, there's this, you know, there is this, you're in a dark green, just like the bottle shows. You're in this dark green world, you know, it just surrounds you with dark green, big, heavy leaves, you know, Russian leather, that kind of thing. And the new one does it to perfection. There's nothing wrong with this. There are no holes in this. If they used an oak moss substitute in here, bravo. You could spray this for somebody and they would say, yes, there's oak moss in here. There is no cheap smelling musks. The musk in here smells legit. It doesn't smell cheap, doesn't smell detergent-esque. The spices are not as much. You don't get as much of the clove, as much of the nutmeg, but honestly, for me, it doesn't matter. I don't even really have a preference. I just wanted to share the slight difference with you guys because I literally bought them to compare them, and unfortunately, there's not too much to compare, but sometimes that's how it goes. But the vintage, these are getting harder and harder to come by, I would say. And so if you're interested in grabbing a vintage, I would say while a Nuge has some, it might be something to look into. Excuse me. Okay. While he has some, it's something to look into, I would say. So, that is pretty much my quick video on Bogart Pour Homme. They're both, if you've experienced either of these, I would love to hear whether you think it's a Chiffre or a Fougère. Excuse me. Because, you know, Parfumo has it listed as a spicy green scent, but then the number one scent that they say it's similar to is Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, which is a Fougère. But then if you go on other sites, they say that Bogart Pour Homme is or Bogart Signature is a Chiffre. So I think it's like a blend of the two. I really don't think anyone knows what it is. I think it's it goes its own way, kind of like the House of Bogart. It just kind of does its own thing. The perfumer is Maurice Morin of Givaudan. And, I mean, as far as masculine fragrances go, they were just hitting their stride in the 70s. They really started to pump out some of my favorite masculines in the 70s. And this is one of the most underrated ones. No one talks about Bogart Signature, you know, because they see the price tag and they instantly equate it with cheap. Oh, this is an $18 fragrance. This is an $18 fragrance for 90 ml. It must be cheap. It must not be good quality. That's baloney. That's why you have to trust your own nose. That's why it's important you don't listen to people on YouTube that you don't know and trust. YouTube obviously is not a friendly place all the time. And so, but that's why I want to do these videos, because I want to share my thoughts with you guys. And my thoughts on this is that this is a fantastic fragrance. Value for money is through the roof. You would have to pay serious money to get a fragrance of this quality today. If a house like Dior, which they wouldn't put this out today, but maybe, you know, Fougères are starting to come back in style, but they're starting to do stuff like from the 80s more than the 70s, I think. But if Dior put out a fragrance like this, it wouldn't be $18. You know, to get a Russian leather heart with birch and this kind of aromatic masculinity in a fragrance, if you're gonna go designer, you're gonna spend way more money than $18. You know what I mean? And so obviously the vintage is gonna be at a little bit of a premium, but if you're someone like me and you want to make up your own mind, I think you'll see if you have the current and you can get this is a little 30 ml. You're not gonna spend an arm and a leg on a 30 ml. You know, Anuja's prices are very fair, and so if you want to compare and see what I'm talking about with the spiciness amped up, you might prefer the increased spiciness. You might prefer the fact that some of the spiciness is toned down here and it just goes right into that Hulk-like green, that spicy green. There is still some, you can pick up the nutmeg and, you know, you can pick up some of the clove, but it's not as prominent in the new one, is what I, excuse me, is what I would say. So, while I still have a voice, I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. This is like, you know, record short time for my channel, but that's okay. Tomorrow, we're going to have a long video with Jacques Masson. And submit your comments, submit your questions down below, and I'll hopefully get to them. They're all going to be asked anonymously, so don't worry about that. But you know, let me know what kind of questions you have for a distributor. His family's been in the business for decades and decades and decades, so it'll be great to kind of hear his thoughts and just have a chat with another fragrance lover. So if you have experience with Bogart Signature, let me know. If you've compared the two, if you tried the vintage versus the modern, let me know. And before I start going into a coughing fit, I'm going to end the video and say thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll be very excited to see everyone tomorrow. Bye, guys.